We're starting a new series on Megillas Esther, and we'll try to go through a little bit the ideas that are in Megillas Esther, and also try to see it a little bit inside. So before we start, as an introduction, we find something very interesting about the Megillah, about Megillas Esther. We read Megillas Esther. We all know, why do we read Megillas Esther twice? Why do we read Megillas Esther? It's called because of Pershumei Nisa. In order to be mefarsim the nes that Hashem did to us, right? Very quickly, there was a terrible gzeira, probably the worst gzeira that ever happened to Klal Yisrael. We'll get back to why exactly. And Hashem saved us from the gzeira. That's a quick version of the story. So, we read Megillas Esther in order to be mefarsim the nes that happened on Purim. But what's very interesting is that if you read Megillas Esther, you don't find any Nisim in the Megillah. In fact, it doesn't even mention Hashem's name. It doesn't mention Hashem's name once in the entire Megillah. And we don't find any great Nisim. Like, what kind of Nes do you see? You see any Mables? You see any Yam Suf splits? Do you see any Mables? Any floods? Anybody get hit by lightning? Like, what happened in the Megillah that was such a big Nes? And what kind of Nes is this? So, it's a fascinating idea that one of the only things that we read to be mefarsim the nes publicly, birabim, as a group, as a whole Klal Yisrael, where the more people you have, the better, the actual reading almost hides the nes. And therefore, it's definitely something worthwhile to spend time on to try to bring out the nes and to see what was going on, as we titled this series, the inside story. What's the behind the scenes? Sometimes we only see things on the surface, but what's going on behind the scenes in order to start to appreciate the Nisim? So why was the Megillah written like this? Why didn't they bring out the Nisim more? Why didn't they mention Hashem a little bit? Why didn't they talk about some of the things that happened that were miraculous? So, just on a very simple level, Megillas Esther is somewhat unique. Maybe there's a few of the Ksuvim that were written after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. And without going too much into the history, but it is important to sort of know when the Megillah story happened and where we are in the history of Klal Yisrael, and we'll bring that out in Mitzvah Hashem more as we go along. Different references in the Megillah, we'll talk about it more. But we're dealing now with the first time that Klal Yisrael as a nation was ever in Golus. See, to us, there's many things in the Megillah that we don't appreciate, we don't understand 100% because we're so used to them. And because of that, like when we talk about Golus, we've been living in Golus for thousands of years. We don't even know what it's like to not live in Golus. We don't even really comprehend the idea of having a Jewish king with the Beis HaMikdash, with our own state, which is the constitution of the state, is the Torah. The laws of the state are the laws of the Torah. That's something that's very foreign to our minds because we're so far removed from anything similar to that. Similarly, we're so far removed from the whole idea of monarchy, from the whole idea of a king off with your head. It's something very removed from our minds, that the way that king and a queen and ministers, we look at it kind of similar to the president, but the president's there for 4 years, and he's voted in, he's voted out, he's just a regular guy. The president can't say off with your head. So there's different ideas in the Megillah that we don't fully comprehend because we're so far removed from them. But this idea, I just lost my train of thought. What were we going back on? I said I didn't comprehend them. We were talking about
King and Queen.
And before the King and Queen.
The time. The history.
So we're the time in history, right?
It's position timeline.
So to understand, what happened was that from the time that Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, we spent 40 years in the Midbar. Then we went into Eretz Yisrael. From that time I don't remember exactly the numbers, but if I recall correctly, it's 850 years, something like that. I don't know if anyone knows history better than me. Which is a tremendous long time, like almost 1,000 years, where we lived in a country in Eretz Yisrael where we ruled over ourselves as a sovereign nation. There was no kings on top of us. And that was a special period in history where there was constant nisim, like we spoke about by Hanukkah, right? There was constant nisim that we saw clearly. There was nevuah, there was Hashem talking to people. And there was such a closeness, we had our own kings, there was a closeness to Hashem, that when they went down to Golus for the first time, Golus Bavel, it was a totally different state that was happening that they've never had experienced before. And this was when the Megillah story took place at the end of Golus Bavel, close to the end of Golus Bavel. After 70 years, we'll see maybe some of the calculations exactly when it was. But what's important to understand that the Megillah was one of the last it was the end of the Ksuvim, the last of the books that were written, and it was written while they were under the rulership of Bavel. Not Bavel at the time, I'm sorry, under the rulership of Achashverosh. And therefore it had to be written in a way that was acceptable to the Persians, because they were under the Persians. They couldn't write Achashverosh was a Rasha, for example, because Achashverosh would kill the guy who wrote it and ban the book, right? They couldn't write the terrible things about the people then. They couldn't bring it all out because it was written under the rulership of the Persians, and therefore it was written in a hidden way. And many, 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 many things are hidden inside the Megillah for us to find. And Chazal, in the Gemara, in the Midrashim, in the Mefarshim, bring out these hidden things that are hidden inside the Megillah. So, just to review quickly what we're saying, so the Megillah, although written to be Mefarshim the Nes, was written to hide the Nes. And therefore, it's incumbent on us to spend time going through the Megillah to find the nisim that Hashem did and to understand the nisim that Hashem did and to read through those hints and to learn through those hints. Now, what if a person doesn't do it? So the Gemara talks about this. And the Gemara talks about what happens if someone doesn't know Hebrew. Should he read the Megillah in his own language or not? And the Gemara discusses the idea that maybe you should. But the Gemara says, what happens if you hear it in Hebrew? Are you Yotze? You don't understand Hebrew. You come to shul, they read the Megillah, you follow along with the Megillah, you have no idea what the guy is talking about, right? I'm sure there's many, many, many people like this. They have no clue. The guy, he's reading the Megillah, you're following along word by word, you come out at the end, what do you say? I don't know. I don't understand Hebrew. It has nothing to do with me. I don't understand Hebrew. What should I do? Are you Yotze Mitzvahs Megillah? So the Gemara says, the loy is someone who only understands a different language, who hears in Hebrew. Yatza, he's Yatza. Fret the Gemara Yada my Ka'amri, but he doesn't know what he's saying. And the whole purpose is to understand what you're saying, to understand the story. If you don't hear the story, then what'd you do? So the Gemara says, sometimes women, those times maybe weren't as educated on my arts. They also don't understand, they're still Yotze. So what's the pshat? There's a mitzvah of kriya, there's a mitzvah to hear it, and that you're Yotze the mitzvah. And Persume Nisa, they hear the basic story. Rashi says, even though they don't understand what they hear, they ask the Shemim, what are they saying? What are all those words? And they tell them the basic story. There was Mordechai and Esther married Achashverosh, and well, fine, okay, they got the basic story, and they're Yotze the Persume Nisa. So, if you don't want to come to the shir every week, or if you haven't done this on your own, you'll still be Yotze the bottom line Persume Nisa. But if you want to try to, that's the bottom line understanding. Hearing the Megillah and just hearing the basic Nes is your Yotze the mitzvah. But if you want to try to understand the Megillah and to have a basic understanding of the words of the Megillah, and a basic understanding, that's the first level. And then the next level would be to see a deeper meaning behind many of the words of the Megillah. So, let's look a little bit at the Megillah, we'll get started with the Megillah, and we'll be able to uncover many of the miracles that happened, and to bring out many of the miracles that happened. So let's go through the basic story quickly outside. What happened? When did the beginning of the Megillah take place? The beginning of the Megillah is the beginning of the Megillah is the third year of Achashverosh's rule. He made a big party. We'll go into the details more. He made a big party. At the party, Vashti refused to come, and Vashti got killed. After Vashti got killed, the whole story, how did Vashti get killed? Haman was the one who suggested it. And then Achashverosh was very sad. He remembered Vashti and didn't have a wife anymore. So he made a little beauty pageant, and he picked Miss Shushan, and that was who he made as his wife, right?
Miss World.
Miss Universe. Whatever.
Didn't he have, he had a whole harem, so he must have had a slew of them.
I didn't say he missed his wife. He missed having a queen. I don't know, right? Okay, so, and then Mordechai comes onto the scene. When did this take place? This took place, I think it's 9 years before the Purim story. So, this party that we read about in the beginning of the Megillah, and this beauty pageant, and killing Vashti and Esther becoming queen, took place 9 years before Haman came along with his Gzeira. So, right? Correct? Yes, that is correct. Okay, now, therefore, it's also very interesting to see some of the things that's going on. We're still going. Esther becoming queen took some time, right? That was the whole first parak is the party basically, and Vashti getting killed. Second parak is basically the whole story of Esther becoming queen. And at the end of the story is another little story with Mordechai. And then the third starts off with the problem with Haman. So it's very interesting to note what's going on over here, and to note what the first two prakim are. And the first two prakim could be understood with an idea. And we'll bring out the idea a little bit of an interesting way. There's a famous shaila in the Gemaras why Masechtas Gittin comes before Masechtas Kedushin. Right? What happens first? The person gets married, and then, well, sometimes he ends up getting a get. But first you should learn about Kedushin, and then you should get up to Gittin. Why does Gittin come before Kedushin? So, the answer is, one of the answers is because we're makdim refuah lamaka. What that means is, in other religions, it used to be impossible to get divorced. You couldn't get divorced. So if a person had no way out, you had absolutely no way out, it's very scary to get married. Now, it doesn't mean that you're looking for a way out, but at the same time, to have absolutely no way out is a very difficult situation. So therefore, we first learn about Masechtas Gittin. Okay, look, if it really doesn't work out, there is a solution. And since there is a solution, if it really doesn't work out, it gives the person the ability to take the risk and to get married, because you know there's some way out. And that's one of the reasons why Masechtas Gittin is before Masechtas Kedushin. Side point. Now, but just what I'm trying to illustrate from there is the idea, something called being makdim refuah lamaka. Before a makkah comes along, sometimes you set up to have the refuah in place. Hashem, when He brings the gzeira on Klal Yisrael, is makdim refuah lamaka. What does that mean? He put everything in the first two prakim. It says, Achar advar me'ela, Gidel HaMelech Achashverosh as Haman ben Amdasa. After Hashem put all these things into place, now we're ready to bring out Haman. Because until these things were in place, Haman couldn't come onto the scene because the refuah wasn't there yet. So the first two prakim, this is one of the biggest ideas to understand in the first two prakim is the idea that everything in the first two prakim is makdim refuah lamaka 9 years before. So sometimes we're looking at events that are happening to us and they make no sense. Try to imagine Queen Esther getting picked to be the queen. How do you think she felt? You think she wanted to marry this Achashverosh as king? And I mean, she was a from lady. She didn't. What do you want to be in the palace for? It's not interesting to her. This is a terrible decree that happened to her. And they probably sat. Who knows what? They probably fasted and davened that she shouldn't be picked. She definitely got hid, and she definitely tried not to be picked. And for 9 years, she's living in the royal palace. And for all those 9 years, she has no idea why. Forget about that. There was no purpose. There was no gzeira even. For 9 years, she's living in the royal palace, and nothing even happened that she should be there. I mean, it's just putting our pieces into. It's like the little ace of spades that you have sitting in the back, waiting for the right time to pull out your little card that you got, your top card, right? Or sometimes people do it in today's day and age, where they'll make donations to a president or whatever, because eventually you never know when you need to have friends in high places. And we did have a good friend in a very high place, the Queen, right? But for all those years, it was unnecessary. So Hashem was makdim refuah l'maka many, many years earlier, and at the time it took place, it was very, very unclear. The time it took place, it was very, very unclear why this was put into place. But we have to believe, we have to understand that this is going on constantly, where Hashem is putting makdim refuah l'maka, and things that are happening to us that we don't understand can become clear years and years later. And there is a big plan over here, and here's one instance where we get to see clearly how that plan played out. And it's one of the many, many lessons that we can learn from the Megillah. One of the many lessons we can learn from the Megillah is that when crazy things happen to us, things that appear to be terrible, it appears to be terrible. She was married to Mordechai HaTzadik, and she got taken from Mordechai HaTzadik and forced to become the queen. What a terrible decree that happened to her. And yet many years later, by the way, when she did save the Jews, what did Mordechai say to her? Umi oidea im la'is kazor sigat l'malchus. Who knows? Maybe this is why you became queen. That's exactly what he's saying to her. In other words, we still have no idea why you became queen, even when the whole story took place. You got to do your attempt, and maybe this is why Hashem made this decree on you that you should become the queen. We don't, after the story, when you get to the end of the story and you look back at the whole story, okay, everything makes sense. But while the story is going on, and while the story of our own lives are going on, while the story is going on, we don't see the end. Yeah, sure, when you get to the end, you look back, say, that's why this happened, and that's why this happened, and that's why this happened to me. Sometimes terrible, terrible things. But now I understand why these things happened to me. I can look back with the hindsight and I can see it. And that's what we have in the Megillah. Take a big story and put it all together.
Can you clarify two things in the first two paragrahs? One is, who is Achashverosh? And two is, what was the relationship between Esther and Mordechai?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Not today. Not right this second.
Okay.
So that's one major idea to understand. This is the idea called Hashem is makdim refuah l'maka. And we'll see as we go through the first two programs that Hashem is putting things into place for years and years later. That's the whole first two programs. And after those things are in place, now Gidel HaMelech as Haman. Now we bring up Haman. Now we're ready for Haman to come on the scene, because the refuah for Haman is already in place. Just this idea, by the way, itself, if you go through the first two programs, you'll see it yourself. The story of Mordechai hearing Big Son Viseresh, that was way early. That was years and years earlier. Again, the story of all the parts killing Vashti, it's all setting up for later. Okay, number two is another idea that Hashem has different ways of doing Nisim. Hashem has different ways of controlling what's going on in this world. So one of the ways is something that we're a little more used to from Chumash and from other events, is big open miracles. So big open miracles where we clearly see the Yad Hashem. Then there's a different way Hashem has of running the world, which is hidden miracles. The Vilna Gaon calls those miracles Atzas Hashem. Atzas Hashem means the advice of Hashem, where Hashem gets us to do things, or gets people to do things that don't appear to be exactly what they would normally do, but He causes different things to happen in order to lead to different results. And we'll see some of those things that happen that are very, very strange, how these things came about and how Hashem caused them to come about. So let's take a look at the challenge. So those are the two things that we're going to discuss a lot. Hiktim Refuah Lamak in the first couple prakim, and this idea of Atzos Hashem, where Hashem has a way of hiddenly, behind the scenes, making things happen, work out the way they want. Now, okay. So let's discuss who's who and what's what in this story. So we have Achashverosh. Who are the key characters? We have Achashverosh. We have Vashti. We have, in the beginning, we have Memuchan, who's Haman, but not called Haman yet. We have Esther, we have Mordechai. Let's see. So I passed out Chumash from here. I put around the thing. If everyone wants to take a Chumash, we'll try. I would like to try to go through everything inside as well, if possible. There should be enough, I hope. If not, there's more. And, you got an extra number? Here, Izzy.
654.
Yeah, we're sure.
Yeah, if you have an English one, some of them have English, page 1252.
Everybody has?
So it says, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. It was in the days of Achashverosh. Who Achashverosh? He was Achashverosh. HaMelech meHodu v'ad Kush, who was the king from Hodu till Kush. Sheva v'Efsrim u'mei Medina, 127 countries. So there's a lot of interesting things in this pasuk. The pasuk says, "Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh." It wasn't days of Achashverosh. Who Achashverosh? He's Achashverosh. Why does it have to say who Achashverosh? Just say Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. HaMelech meHodu v'ad Kush, who was the king. Why does it say who Achashverosh? So the Gemara says, "Who berishrei mitchilosei v'ad soifai." Who Achashverosh? He stayed Achashverosh throughout this whole story. From the beginning of the story to the end of the story, there was no change seen in Achashverosh. Even though these great miracles happened, even though there was all these different things going on, he remained Achashverosh, the same Achashverosh. There's a very interesting. We're going to be mixing in also like short words as well, because they illustrate some of the longer concepts. So there's a fascinating idea brought out by the Vilna Gaon to understand what it means, who Achashverosh. All the way at the end of the Megillah, if you take a look on page, whatever, I don't have the same pages as you, because I got the English version. If you take a look at the last page of the Megillah, you look all the way at one of the last psukim, Perek Yud, Pasuk Aleph. So it's the third last pasuk. It says, "V'yasam hamelech Achashverosh mas al artz iyayam." Achashverosh put a tax on the land and on the islands. We're in the middle of talking about the glory of finishing Purim, and they set up Purim and all that, and it throws in Achashverosh made a tax. Why does it say that Achashverosh made a tax? What's the significance of this statement? So, just a side point, Rabbi Miller says this is one of the proofs that this was written specially as like for the Persians as well to see the story, and therefore I guess it was a significant event in Persian history. So they put it in just to show that it wasn't only about it's not all about the Jews. This is a general historical accounting of that time. But the Vilna Gaon says like this. The Vilna Gaon says a fascinating idea. Why does it say that he paid a tax? Because earlier on Perek Beis, Pasuk Yud Zayin, so it says that Achashverosh picked Esther. V'yav HaMelech Esther mikol hanoshim. The Melech loved Esther from all the women. He picked her from all the virgins. V'yasam Keser Melech V'yashem made her the queen. V'yamlichet Achas Vashti. V'yas HaMelech Mishteh Garo. The Melech made a large feast. L'chol Sarva V'arav. It's Mishteh Esther. He called it Mishteh Esther. V'hanacha l'medinas Asa. And he made a hanacha for the countries. And the Gemara in Megillah says, why did he make a hanacha? Why did he make a tax relief? He made a tax relief for all the countries, because the Gemara says that he wanted Esther to tell her, very badly, he wanted Esther to tell him where she was from. And since she wasn't saying where she was from, so he tried to do certain things to get her to say. And one of the things he tried to do to get her to say was to make a tax relief from all his countries, and he was hoping that she was from one of the countries. and that would make her happy, and that would get her to say what it was. It was sort of like a present to Esther. At the end of the story, when he finds out that she's a Jew, and he finds out she's not from any of the countries, so what does he do? What did he learn from this whole story? Hey, I gave a tax relief for no reason. She's not from any of those countries. So at the end of the whole story, what does he do? Better put that tax back. Why am I letting off that tax? And he quickly put the tax back.
The missing vowel in Hasakah, spelling of Achashverosh.
Where?
Very good.
Yeah, I don't know why. But anyways, so that's what it means. From the beginning of the story to the end of the story, he stayed the same Rasha. And instead of seeing from the miracles that Hashem did and the amazing ways that Hashem brought about the miracles of Purim, instead of learning from that and becoming and maybe growing, what did he do? He said, hey, 1 second. It's all about the money. 1 second. I gave off that tax for no reason. Let me put that tax back on.
The tax relief was essentially on for 10 years.
Yeah.
He wasn't that worried about the money.
Yeah. I hear the question.
So worried, he
I hear your
would have found out.
I hear your
right?
question.
It was retroactive.
Retroactive is like...
He got his mind back on business.
McGinty.
We need to help his people and get her to come and say, well,
Okay.
they're my people.
Well, that the Gemara says.
He got his mind back on business.
But anyways, the idea is that Hu Achashverosh, he stayed the same Rasha. Through the whole story, he stayed the same Rasha. Now the next word is even more important. This word Hamoilech is a very important word for understanding the story. Hamoilech means he made himself king. The Gemara says, why does it say Hamoilech? The Gemara says that Rashi says, I don't have Rashi over here. Rashi says on the word Hamoilech, Shamalach me'atzmai, lo haya mizera melucha. He became king, but he wasn't from royal lineage. He became king by using his wealth. It was a coup. By using his wealth, after the previous king died, he became king by using his wealth. But he wasn't a born king. And one of the things that he did after he became king, in order to give him legitimacy, was he married Vashti. Vashti was a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar.
Belshazzar.
She was named what?
Vashti was the granddaughter.
Vashti was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe she was the daughter of Belshazzar, I don't know. But she was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. And Vashti was a royal lineage. Vashti's grandfather was the greatest king ever. He was the one who destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, but he had a huge empire. So by Achashverosh marrying her, it gave him legitimacy. Now, it also creates a little bit of a dangerous situation. The Gemara tells us, "Nechois darga, right? Go down a level and marry a woman. Don't go up a level and marry a woman, because it's not a simple thing to have your wife more chashuv than you. Whether it's wealthier, whether it's in lineage." It's not a simple thing to have your wife higher than you. The Gemara tells us, "Nechois darga v'nachas." You should go down a level and get married. Don't go up a level.
You tell your wife that.
And it's not so easy finding a wife that's at a lower level than you are.
This is not a Sean Bias class. And I think that almost everybody here is married already anyway, so whatever. It's too late for you. So
No, we stay off of their head.
but it is a dangerous situation, because you have over here like this. You have an interesting king. You have a king who's sort of trying to prove himself, sort of trying to establish himself as a king, and you have a queen who's on a higher level than him. Now, let's talk about this a little bit, because it's interesting. Who is the person that's giving Achashverosh legitimacy on some level? It's Vashti. Would you say that it's a smart thing for Achashverosh to kill Vashti? The whole reason he married her was to give him legitimacy. Why would he go and kill her? Now, Why did he marry her in the first place? Because he wanted someone of royal lineage. Who does a king usually marry? Not usually a commoner. And if it's going to be a commoner, it's not usually a from Jewish commoner. So let's try to imagine in our day and age. Let's say we have King Obama, right? Or whoever. What's the guys in Iran called? What are those guys in Ahmadinejad? It's almost sounds like Achashverosh, right? So you got him. What are they like? Well, maybe he's like Haman. Who's the real guy? The Shah, whatever, right? Those guys are. That's kind of like a tyrant, right? That's kind of like a king. I don't know. So try to imagine the Shah of Iran, who's married to Vashti, the whatever it is, the Empress of whatever, Saudi Arabia or something, killing his wife and marrying a frum Jewish lady. How do you make that come about? And to have, we just think of it like, oh yeah, Esther became the queen. Yeah, okay, Esther became the queen. No, Vashti got killed, Esther became the queen. But why would he kill Vashti? The Vashti is the one giving him legitimacy. And how in the world do you get a frum Jewish lady to become the queen? Why would he marry a frum Jewish lady? Would Barack Obama marry a frum Jewish lady? What?
He probably didn't know that she was from her.
He didn't, but still, that's part of the challenge. Wouldn't you look into, do you ask, your daughter's going out with someone, do you ask, hey, what's the father-in-law's name? Or you just okay, get married, no problem. No problem. Where do you come from? I don't want to say it. Okay. I'll marry you anyways. This is the king. He could have married anybody. He should have made an alliance with some other country. He should have married First, he shouldn't have killed his wife, because that was his alliance with the whole Babylonian Empire. And if he is going to do it, kill her, so then he should find another queen that's a roy for this. And this is one of the amazing things that Hashem did, where we have to see how this came about. How did Hashem? This is the challenge. Here, Aryeh Kaplan has a book. It's called If You Were God. Anyone ever read it? Mm-hmm. It's an awesome book if you never read it. It's If You Were God. So if you were God, would you even dream this one up? Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's wipe out. Let's get whatever, the Shah to kill his wife. And then I got a great idea. Let's get the Shah to marry Mrs. Elyashiv, right? Rebbitzin Elyashiv. What? That's not good. Rebbitzin Feinstein. Moshe Feinstein's wife is going to become the queen of Iran. What? Where did this come from? What kind of idea is this? And how did this come about?
And he'll never guess she's Jewish.
Right, and I'd never even ask her. She's not going to tell him.
Another question, which is probably will precede this, is normally when when Klal Yisrael is on the verge or threatened of annihilation, there's a story before that particular generation, wasn't particularly strong in Emunah and Hashem. There's nothing in here indicating that there was something wrong.
So there is. We're going to get up to that in a minute. We'll see that. We're going to get up to that in a minute. It's also hidden, but it is here.
Achashverosh over here comes across as a total weakling because he doesn't decide to kill Vashti. He's asking his advisors. We're
going to get up to that too, why he did that.
But it's even more than that. They all play on his ego. It's like Pharaoh. They all play up to him. Oh, she didn't listen to you. Get rid of her. Oh, you have to find the most beautiful person in the world. And
they don't all do that.
Normally,
all he does, that is a mission.
Does it.
His whole life is from one mission to the next.
Well, that's it. We'll go through it a little bit. But normally kings don't marry based on only beauty. Nobody gets married based on only beauty.
Maybe you take somebody who's beautiful, put them in the harem. You don't have to make them your first wife.
Why you followed his type of beauty? That's the bottom line.
Yeah, but that's not a normal thing to do. It's not logical to marry someone just based on type. She's not wealthy. She's nothing. Just a regular person, and she's from Jewish lady. This was the challenge that Hashem had in front of him. But this was his plan. This is how he wanted to set it up. So let's see. How did he go about doing this? These are the characters that we have. These are the characters in place. Now, to remember who was Achashverosh. Achashverosh was originally a stable boy in the house of Nebuchadnezzar. He worked as a stable boy in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. So we have a stable boy, not of royal lineage.
Haman also worked as a stable boy.
Haman worked as a barber.
For Mordechai.
No, he worked just for a day. But he worked Haman was the royal barber. So we have interesting thing. We have the king who was originally the stable boy, and soon we're going to get up to the prime minister who was originally a barber. Now in today's day and age, it's actually not impossible, right? Again, because in today's day and age, everybody is equal and there's no levels. As much theoretically possible for someone to rise up from being a barber, make tons and tons of money, invent the new shaving cream or something, make tons and tons of money, pay billions of dollars for ads and who knows where, and become the president. Theoretically possible in today's day and age. What?
An actor did it.
Yeah, people do it all the time now. But
or a corporal to a
general.
yeah, people do it all the time in today's day and age, but there wasn't the same world back then. You didn't have the same kind of opportunities that you have now. It's big. It was a much bigger chiddush, a much more complicated thing for this to have come about. But it's very important to understand the nature of Achashverosh was that he was someone who was Hamoilech, who became king himself, and he was not a king from royal lineage. So what did Achashverosh do? In those days, when Achashverosh sat on his throne, which was in Shushan, in his third year, he made a party. So let's see for a second. It says in those days, what do the words Keshavas Hamelach Achashverosh al Kisei Machusai simply mean? When Achashverosh sat on his throne, what does it mean, sat on his throne? Theoretically, he sat on his throne every day, right? So what does it mean he sat on his throne? It means he was settled into his throne. Something happened at that time. It actually sounds like he became king. Keshavas Hamelach Achashverosh, when he became king. But the next pasuk says, it was the third year of his kingship. So was it the third year of his kingship, or was it the beginning of his kingship? So the Gemara discusses this question. Rashi discusses this question, and
do like initiation or welcoming after the third year.
Yes, it could be. What happened by the third year? So the Gemara discusses this question. Rashi discusses, and the Vilna Gaon also says a different shot. What?
What's about this business with the throne of Shlomo?
Yeah, so that's the Medrash. The Vilna Gaon brings down that Medrash. The Gemara doesn't bring that down. The Gemara is a different shot. So the Gemara's pshat, I'll just say the Gemara's pshat very quickly. These kings of Bavel, it started off as Bavel, and then Bavel passed on to the Persian Median Empire. So sometimes it was kings of Madai, sometimes it was kings of Persia. They were quite aware of the nevuah that was told that Klal Yisrael was going to go into exile for 70 years. Remember, the second ghost, the one that we're in, is a ghost with no time limit. We don't know when we're going to be redeemed. But they did. They were told 70 years. But there was a bit of a confusion behind this number 70 years, when to start the counting. It wasn't clear exactly when to start the counting of the 70 years. And these kings knew, they believed in Hashem, they heard about these open miracles. It wasn't as simple as it is now. And they had amongst them the treasures of the Beis HaMikdash, but they were scared to use them until they saw whether Hashem was going to redeem them. So an earlier king, Belshazzar, he made a calculation, and his calculation worked out to that at that night it was 70 years, and he saw that the Jews weren't redeemed. So he said, "Oh, guess Hashem forgot about them. They weren't good enough in Gos. Now I'm safe to take out the Kalim from the Beis HaMikdash. It's safe for me to take them out and to use them." So he took them out and used them, and what happened that night? Boom, he was killed. He took out the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash and he was killed for using them. What was the mistake in his calculation? So he calculated from when Nebuchadnezzar became king. So he calculated Lefi Malois LeBavel, when Bavel was ruled for 70 years. But there was a few different possibilities of how to calculate it. But Achashverosh was a later king, and Achashverosh said, after him was Koresh, then Achashverosh, and Achashverosh said that he made his calculation. He realized that now is 70 years. And the Gemara says that's what it means, when he was settled. For the first 2 years, he wasn't settled because he was scared that the Jews were going to be left, going to be redeemed, taken out. On the 3rd year, when he saw they weren't taken out, then he was kishevas, then he calmed down. And what happened? He took out the Kelim of Beis HaMikdash, and the Satan came, and what happened? Vashti was killed. That day, right? You start playing around with the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, and not good things happen. What was the truth behind the calculation?
The first day of the feast, she was killed?
But he
I don't know if it was the same exact second.
Because there was a feast that went on for half a year.
7 days. It's not clear when he took out.
No, it's the last feast.
When did he take out the Kelim of Beis HaMikdash?
He didn't take that cam until the second feast?
No, he right the very first one.
No, the second one, I think. I think it was the second one. But anyways, regardless.
The first feast went on for half a year.
Regardless, during the time when he used it, that's when ended up through that feast that Vashti was killed. It was a long feast. What was the truth behind the calculation? So the truth is actually interesting, that there's 2 ways to calculate it. There was Lefi Chorvas Yerushalayim, which was when Yerushalayim was completely destroyed, and there was Lefi Golus Bavel. So either it was when they went down to Bavel, the Golus Bavel, that's 70 years, or Chorvas Yerushalayim after Yerushalayim got completely destroyed. I just don't know how much to say. We're running out of time over here. But very quickly, the first Beis HaMikdash went in stages. The first stage was Nebuchadnezzar came and he what? Right, and Nebuchadnezzar came and he conquered Yerushalayim. When he conquered Yerushalayim for the first time, he made the first wave of ghosts. That first wave of ghosts was the Cheresh and the Masker, which was about 3,000 people, which was the Talmidei Chacham. We'll see later when it says by Mordechai, Asher Haglam Yerushalayim. If you look in Parak Beis, Pasuk Vav, just to have an idea of what's going on over here. It says Asher Haglam Yerushalayim. He was exiled from Yerushalayim Im Hagoyla, with the exile Asher Haglasa, that was exiled in Yechanya Melech Yehuda, at the time of Yechanya Melech Yehuda. Asher Hegla Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel. And Nebuchadnezzar brought down to go. So that was the first wave of exile that Nebuchadnezzar caused, and that was the first people right at the first time when he conquered them. He took the king Yochanan or Yechanya, and he took the Cheresh and the Masker, which is the 3,000 Talmidei Chacham down to Bavel. Now, Rabbi Miller points out that this is similar to a few weeks ago's Parsha when Yaakov was sort of setting up the Golus down to Mitzrayim. What did he do first? He sent Yehuda Lahoiris Lefan of Goshna. And Rashi says, what does it mean Lahoiris Lefan of Goshna? To set up a yeshiva. And we find that Bavel was a tremendous Torah community which lasted for thousands of years, all the way down to the end of the second Beis HaMikdash. But the second Beis HaMikdash, the going back to Eretz Yisrael, the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, not everybody went back. Only some people went back. And Bavel remained the Torah center that whole time, eventually leading to the Talmud Bavli, which was in Bavel. Bavel was a Torah center always. And why was Bavel such a strong Torah center? Because it was set up first by the Talmidei Chacham. They came there first, and they set it up as them being in charge, just like Yehuda set up a yeshiva first. And when a city is built around a yeshiva or a kollel, let's say, whatever, then what happens is it's a different kind of city than when it's set up the other way, and then a kollel comes in. Side point. Anyways, the bottom line is, I'm not saying anything about.
This story doesn't take place in Bavel. It takes place in Modai, right?
What?
This story takes place in Modai, not in Bavel.
Bavel and Modai change. We'll talk about it a different time. Anyways, the point is like this. So there was one Golus then, and then there was then they fought back. They rebelled, and 18 years later, then there was another Golus. About I think 11 years later, and then 18 years later was the final Golus. The final Golus, I think I said this recently. The final Golus was the story of Gedaliah ben Achikam. Last year, the story of Gedaliah ben Achikam. It's always important to remember what is Tainus Tzoim Gedaliah ben Achikam. Why do we have a Tzoim? Why do we have a fast day for the death of one person? It's only fast day for the death of an individual, because we need to understand who this individual was. What happened was that after the Cheresh and the Masker went out, there was still tremendous amount of people in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael. And this fellow, Gedaliah ben Achikam, was an unbelievable individual who was able to bring everyone back to tshuva. And Klal Yisrael was starting to do tshuva, and he was like the governor. And had he remained going for a little while, we would have not needed this complete galus, because he was able to bring everyone back to tshuva. And make a long story short, he was killed by friendly fire. They invited him to have a peace treaty, and at the peace treaty they stabbed him and they killed him. And the Gemara says, because he shouldn't have met with them. He should have been more cautious.
Who is they?
The bad guys. I forgot what they were called at the time.
They were Persians, or they were
no Jews. Friendly fire. Jews. Yes. So that's why we have something called Psoim Gedaliah ben Achikam. And when that happened, when he got killed, shortly after was the final exile for 52 years, which is 18 years after the original exile. There were still people living there for 52 years. Nobody lived in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, and that's when it was like a sada. For 52 years, no one lived there. Anyways, the true counting of 70 years is supposed to be Charvus Yerushalayim at the end of the 18 years. So they made the calculation from the exile to Bavel. The first calculation was made from not the exile to Bavel, but the creation of Bavel as a state. So there's a few different ways to calculate it. When the Geula happened, like when the redemption happened, it happened in stages. The first stage was in the days of Koresh, which was 18 years before the final Geula from Bavel, or the main Geula from Bavel, was a minor Geula from Bavel. And that happened in the days of Koresh. Koyamar Hashem l'Mashiach l'Koresh. Hashem said that Koresh, that Hashem said, that Koresh said like this: Kol ma'amachos ha'aretz nasan li Hashem l'kei Shemaim. All the countries Hashem gave me, who pakad alai livnas l'bayis Hashem, and he said I should go and build a house in Yerushalayim, and that was the first redemption, which was before this whole story of Purim. They had already gone back to Yerushalayim, some people, and started to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. But the final one was 18 years later. In Moz Tzur, this is a side point, but in Moz Tzur we say this. We say Kates Bavel, Zerubbabel, which was the Kates from the Galus to Bavel, was the first Geula, which is led by Zerubbabel. But the Kate Shivim, which was the second Geula, which is at the end of the 70 years from Chavis Yerushalayim, no Shati. That's when I was finally saved. Side point. So there was two Geulas, there's two Galuses, and there's actually three Galuses. That's the story of Tzom Gedaliah ben Achikam. Very quickly, that's what we fast then. That's what it means when we say Moaz Tzur. Back to the Megillah. So when Achashverosh's third year was when he felt confident that Klal Yisrael wasn't going to be redeemed. And because he felt Klal Yisrael wasn't going to be redeemed, so he was Kesheves Achashverosh Akis Machusei, he sort of relaxed on his throne. I guess we have to stop, it's late. But
consolidated his power.
So Rashi says over there, Rashi says a different pshat. Rashi says he consolidated his power. Should I just say the last pshat from the Vilna Gaon? Let's take 2 more minutes. The Vilna Gaon, so that's what Rashi says. So that's what the Gemara says. That I really just went through that to have a quick history lesson of when this was and what was going on at the time. Rashi, the Vilna Gaon brings down a medrash. The medrash says that Achashverosh, again, remember, he was trying to build himself up as a king. He wasn't a legitimate king. He was trying to build himself up. One of the ways he wanted to build himself up was to build the most fabulous throne that ever was. Who was the most fabulous throne that ever was the throne of Shlomo HaMelech. The problem is, different kings had tried to sit on the throne of Shlomo HaMelech and they were thrown off. There's a famous Paro called Paro Necho, Paro the crippled. Why was he crippled? Because he sat on Shlomo HaMelech's throne and he got thrown off and he became lame. Achashverosh didn't want to become lame. So therefore he decided to build a replica of Shlomo HaMelech's throne. The place where the people who could build the replica were in Shushan. And therefore he built the throne in Shushan. But then, once they built it, they realized the problem. It was too big to transport. So therefore, Hashem made, this is all part of Hashem's plan, Hashem made Achashverosh want to build this throne, that the people who had to build it were in Shushan. Here we go with, hidden miracles that don't appear to be miracles. He wanted to build Shalom. First of all, we had a king who wasn't a real king. Therefore, he wanted to build a throne that was unbelievable. The only place in the people could build the throne was in Shushan. They couldn't transport it. Because of that, Achashverosh decided to transfer the whole kingdom, the capital city. It used to be Washington, D.C. for whatever, years and years and years. It was Washington, D.C. It moved to Brooklyn, New York, or actually Lakewood, New Jersey. Why did it move to Lakewood, New Jersey became the capital of this huge empire. Why? Because that's where Mordechai and Esther lived. And Mordechai had to be there for the Purim story. Hashem doesn't want to make Mordechai have to move, so he makes them all move to Mordechai. So the whole retina, all the officers, all the Beis Haman, everything moved to Shushan. I did hear a different shot. I heard a little bit of a different shot and why it moved there, which is similar but also interesting. That Achashverosh was trying to erase the whole Bavel business. Bavel was the one who created this whole empire. He sort of bought it out. He was trying to erase that part of history. He was trying to establish a new history, and therefore he Bedavka didn't want the capital over there. He Bedavka wanted a new capital city.
St. Petersburg.
Yeah, similar. So that's a different idea. But just to go back into the Megillah, just to read that in. So then it says like this: It was the beginning of him sitting on this throne. Either the main idea is the throne, or the fact that it's in Shushan, depending on how you learn it. B'shna Shalosh Malchus was the third year of his reign, but it was the first year in Shushan, or is the first year on this new throne. So we're just putting into place a little bit the events that are going to happen. Mitzvah Hashem, next week I'll do a quick review of like what the things we said now, and then we'll continue to go through it. Hopefully we'll go a little faster. We won't have the introduction.